to run their devices and help the third world countries again, where they would have power and be able to run, get clean water and have wells. The population would go up, and that's what they want. They want the population not to go up; they want it to go down.
Well, I've read an awful lot of articles that have said that, and you can find this on the Georgia Guidestones. They want to reduce the population of this world to no more than 550 million. And why do you do that? You basically have this 550 million, and what is that 550 million people doing? They're serving the power elite. If you don't have something that is basically going to serve them, then they're not interested in you.
No, you become the opposite. You become where basically it costs them money, and that's what they want. They want to.
I'm sure that the people in my band who are responsible for, like I said, attempting to raise people's awareness and consciousness would probably be considered persona non grata.
Well, maybe, but maybe not. I'll tell you the feedback, even on my emails on my computer right now, I keep checking, and I'm getting a lot of emails right now from people who are listening, and they said, hey, they love your music and they love what you're saying. So, I mean, you, at least to our listeners on my show, you're hitting home with them.
You know what one of the coolest things is that I have the privilege of being with people that are extremely extensional. They understand a lot of things that people may be unaware of, but we're trying to make them aware of them. They're cerebral, they're creative, and you know what? They're actually very nice people. That old adage, well, nice guys finish last, doesn't apply to the people in my band. They're very approachable, and I think that all of them, to a person, wants the best that there is for human beings at large. And that's one of the joys about working with them.
Well,
they're just fabulous human beings.
Well, I think we all want that deep down. I know the reason why I do my show. I do it, one, it's entertainment. And, I will say this. I pretty much bring on guests, and I pretty much let them say anything they want. I don't bleep them out. I don't, whatever. But it's mainly entertainment. And I try to bring a variety of guests on, be it about, ghost hunting or Bigfoot or UFOs. I will say right now, anything to do with UFOs and abductions is the hottest thing out there. Do you honestly think, Tom, that people are being abducted and experimented on? Do you think that cattle mutilations are done by the government, or some of it done by the government, or is done by aliens? The same with human mutilations. I've got pictures on my computer, which, actually I did have. I finally took them off. I just couldn't stand having them on there anymore. Of human mutilations that happen like in South America, Africa, and, a few other countries. And I even had one in our country that happened back about 6 years ago that couldn't have been done with our technology. What's your gut feeling on all that?
My gut feeling is that there is call it an intelligence that's basically responsible for using various DNA to create a hybrid creature. Because when you look at what's going on, and I talked earlier about intelligences that are manipulating things, and I'll put it this way. I think that when you look at climate change and you look at the amount of methane that's increasing in the atmosphere, who's to say, really, Gary, that there isn't a move afoot on some level to create a hybrid race that they're basically attempting to make climate changes for? I think that's one among the many, and I think that we need to look at that scenario. And I think that we know when you're talking about operators and things, it's entirely plausible.
I brought that up the other night, and boy, did I get some hate mail from it. I honestly said that the same thing that you mentioned. I said, what do you think about all these earth changes that's going on? Antarctica melting, the sea rising, the air becoming, changing. all this stuff's going on. Do you think we're being manipulated for another humanoid type of race that eventually wants to come over and take over the planet? And people said, that's not true.
Look at the chemtrails. I mean, that's been going on for years and years and years. I can remember, 20 years ago, getting up and there was a fog that had come in, and the whole ground was covered. I thought there were maybe little spiders that were making all these webs all over the place, and that wasn't the case. I had a friend of mine went out one day. He was a chemist at the University of Washington, and he just out of curiosity, he took some of the stuff, he put it in a test tube, he took it in, and he started analyzing because he was just curious. He said, that there's no natural phenomenon that does that. And he started finding things about, that were like heavy metals like barium, aluminum oxide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he went, Tom, none of that stuff is good for human beings.
It's toxic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good way to slowly, cause older people to pass on, speed up the death rate and all that stuff. And sometimes I wonder if that is what's going on. Because, I mean, to breathe that stuff, and it's weird because the chemtrails don't seem to go away. They keep doing it in different areas, off and on and off and on.
Well, I know that, that was one thing that Corey and I were talking about. And like I said, there was one day when the entire western horizon was just one massive checkerboard of chemtrails. And what was really funny is that if you look at the sun, and there's this haze out, the sun, I remember when I was growing up, the sun used to be a bright yellow color. You look at it now, it's not the same color anymore. It's like an off-white color. And I don't know if that's because of what they're doing with the atmosphere, or you have a sun that's going from a hydrogen sun to a helium sun. I wish I knew. But I know that there's something going on.
I was just going to ask you that. Me and you must have really connected there on that. I remember, because we're close to the same age, I remember when I was a kid, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it was so bright my eyes would hurt. I grew up in the Seattle area. I mean, and I remember that. And a couple of years ago, I live up in the Gig Harbor area of Washington. I remember before my injury walking up the stairs, and it was really sunny, but it wasn't as bright like it used to be, what I remember. And I then started talking to other people, a couple scientists, and they said the same thing, that the sun output is not as bright as it was. Now, has the Earth maybe changed its orbit a little bit? Maybe we're on a tilt, maybe on its axis. Is something going on? Or like you said, is the sun starting to cool off? Is there something on that the government is not telling the people? I mean, it's crazy. Like before you came on, I don't know if you heard the first part of the show, but I mean, we got a government right now who's stripped everything, the EPA, anything to do to help protect our planet and buy us more time. We just sat there and chucked it all off. And I can't understand why. Why would they do this?
Yeah, it's knowing exactly. I think there's more than one agenda, and I think that they're not necessarily in favor of people like Gary Anderson and Tom Davis. I think that there are also forces that are attempting to countermand what these malevolent people are doing. And I think that there are people that are, in fact, manipulated by intelligences that are outside of what empirical logic dictates exists. And you remember your Shakespeare when Hamlet was talking to Horatio, and he said, there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt up in your philosophy. And I think that you're talking about, an array of things out there that are manipulating people and things.
That is, you so well put. And they have an objective to it, and that's the part. I sit here and I try to bring guests on And when we get into this one subject, everybody goes, nobody has an answer, because you don't. But I know, like, something is going on, and I don't know. It's scary. Why would we, like I was saying earlier, why would we even consider putting somebody on Mars when we haven't put anybody on the moon, and created a moon base, let alone why don't we clean up our own atmosphere? No, there's reasons, and is it somebody just say, oh, hey, I created more jobs to keep my promise, and we strip the EPA and get rid of all the inspectors, and we relax every law there is for pollution to create jobs? If we have to do that to create jobs, then we are really in a deep mess.
Yeah, we are in some deep kimchi, that's for sure. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, remember a couple of months ago when Trump came out and he talked about the, quote, Space Force that he another branch of the military that he wanted to start, and he wanted to, he was talking about the exploration of space and having this new military force out there. Do you remember that was part of the national news?
I remember all of a sudden what happened with the Nimitz in 2004, all of a sudden hit the news. And then, followed up about 2 weeks later, the Secretary of the Air Force to the graduating cadets says to the cadets, our next world war will not be a war on the ground. It'll be in space. Then, a month later, the president jokingly says, we need to create a space force. And I remember laughing that one off. And then, all of a sudden, he was somewhat serious about it. Now, do we already have a space force and he's trying to cover it up? Or are we in deep kimchi? Again, I stress, is something going on that they don't want us to know about? And that
I had a retired engineer that told me that we already had craft out there that were anti-gravity, ion drive. I could go on and on and on about the different things that he was expressing to me. And he said, Tom, everything that you see on terra firma, he said, think at least a century past that technologically. And he said, we already have it. They're already out there. They already have a space force that's operated by the United States Navy. And when people tell me things like that, what I do is I'm not for them or against them. What I do is I store them away for future frames of reference until I can find some material to help corroborate that. But those are things that, people that I rubbed elbows with talk to me about. And, it just makes you wonder that all of a sudden, well, I could think of two instances. I remember when President Reagan came out and said, he was speaking in front of the United Nations, and I'm sure you remember his speech where he said, it would be really something if an external force from outer space came down here, the whole world would unite together. And I went, yeah. And what if Wernher von Braun, who attempted to warn people about that, and he said, don't put it past your government, and because you don't understand the technology that they have at their disposal to basically feign something like that, do a false flag, if you will, so that all these craft that you think are extraterrestrial, in fact, they're not. They came from this planet. They basically feign a interstellar force coming out here to, eradicate mankind. And of course, hey, what do you have then? You basically have someone that says, hey, we got all band together under one world government and we're going to fix this. Really? That's interesting. It's people like that basically go out of their way to create the problem, and then they come up with the solution.
Yeah. What's the solution?
Well, I think that's where you have this thing. You can call it the Illuminati. You can call it the New World Order. You can you can basically label whatever you want. But I think that what they really want to do is create a situation where they're saying, hey, they create the problem and they say, hey, we're going to come up with a solution. Well, I think part of the solution may be on the Georgia Guidestones. But what they would do is it's like the frog in the pot, they would turn up the heat really slowly. Yeah. And by the time the frog realized what's happening, it's too late.
Well, I have a guy coming on here in about 3 weeks. He claims that basically something's going to happen here eventually, very shortly actually, that a couple cities will